the entire law could be dramatically simplified because it turns out that most of that law is for controlling people. Children don't want to do that, therefore you need to do that. And if you don't do that, we will do this to you. And if you don't do that, then there's the whole structure, superstructure of crazy rules and regulations. So in Poland, we have an idea how to keep the law simple. We still try the rebellion. I don't know if it's going to be successful. However, I can say we have, I think, around 3 people in the parliament who might support the law. So 15 people in the parliament might mean that the law becomes a subject of the parliamentary debate. So comparing with what we had 3 years ago, with no resources, no money, just students, we made tremendous progress. Anyway, who got his own propositions? Sifan, are you listening?
Yes,
So
but I was waiting for the others to say their thoughts before I jump in.
yes, okay.
Sorry, maybe it's stupid question. Out of the circle, uh, what is the idea? What is the actually the goal of the legislation you want to push through the parliament? Like,
It's extremely simple. First of all, you remove coercion. At this point, you rely on the natural instincts of learning, which all kids have, as long as you don't destroy it with schooling. So we have
so
practically.
no, okay, sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, go
So
on.
that will be the point one. Second point is support. In other words, there are families which can't afford education, they can't afford a computer even. So the support would be in terms of vouchers for all children to spend on their education for devices, for computers, for schools, for democratic schools, for online schools. And the third point is also very simple. We have already a complex education system. We do not dismantle or given up on this. We just pass this education system to the hands of local authority, which most of it is already in the hands of local authority, except for the superstructures of a school inspectorate, superstructures of the Ministry of Education, and other complex institutions that keep controlling the decisions at this local level. So the only difference is that we would have the same ownership, but without the control from the above. So, in other words, the plan is this: freedom, support, and not destroying what we already have. And this can be really written on just a few pages.
Wait, Piotr, so how do you plan to convince most people? Because I feel like your average person is a bit dogmatic about it. Like they
Mhm.
think school is all important. So like I agree with you, but I feel like your average person is not gonna agree. So how do you plan to convince them?
Yes, I will quickly recapitulate my 3 points because we welcome Vita Grabowski, who was part of this whole process before we got to the Lex Libertas, the simple law. So the simple law is, again, freedom for children, support for the weak, and not destroying what we have built until now. And if you're asking me how we can convince the adult world, the claim is we can't. In other words, the body of accumulated mythology about the old system is too big to move it. In other words, too many people would need to be convinced. That's why when students came up with ideas of a school strike, I immediately jumped on this, and I'm telling you, oh wait, guys, we don't have Richard Frensham. I think I'll have to send him a link. Perhaps he doesn't know it yet. So I'll just finish the sentence. This school strike could be one of the factors in the fight for freedom. And I'm telling you, people who are in that field, and that's why I thought about Richard Frensham and also Tom Dury and also Peter Gray and here Sifan Zavahir, they didn't need an explanation. They instinctively know that the young generation understands their rights instinctively through their emotions. So we don't need to convince them. They are practically already convinced. And interestingly, 2 3 years after graduation, they already started changing their thinking because they start having regrets. Why didn't I learn this? Why didn't I will be in better position in my life? And then 5 years later, they have their own children and they start repeating the cycle again. So one of those factors of change would be to use students and in their protest. The other factor is the component of elite in democracy. In other words, if we have three parliamentarians and somehow they can convince 15 and they can have a bill, then we don't need to convince the whole society as long as we convince those who might submit a parliamentary bill, which might be yet supported by a school strike, to which, in addition to unhappy students, a group of teachers who are also extremely unhappy might join, and perhaps a substantial portion of the social group of parents. And in the end, this mass of those who already know the system needs to be changed might decide the outcome of the bill in the parliament. So anyway, that's the hope, the vision. For me, it's the simplest pathway I can see. But maybe there is a better one, especially that Vito is a skeptic of this plan. So maybe
I feel like that's very optimistic. Like even if even if the bill would pass, I feel like there would be a lot of people that are gonna pretty much disagree with it. So
yeah, that's not an issue. That's part of the solution. That we will not have an instant freedom for children. We will have a system which can evolve in that direction. If you have parents who are authoritarian, who believed in the old system, even children, some of the children believe that
Wykop mamę z łóżka.
is anybody asking a question? Or it was just noise? Okay.
I think background noise.
Okay. So if the bill passes, we don't have a rapid change towards freedom. We need to change the culture for that. But there will be no barriers on the optimization and evolution of the system.
Okay, I see. So you wanna change the culture from starting from young people and hope it gets bigger.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can see it already. We have a fantastic homeschooling platform called School in the Cloud. And we can see how kids who are freed from the system, how much they enjoy that freedom, how they love learning their own way. The school doesn't provide, we have compulsory exams, but those exams are not rigorous. They're very tolerant. They look for the strength of all children. So the kids who are in this school in the cloud, they're like radiate their happiness. And after a week or a month or perhaps even a couple of months, most of their friends from their environment or prior school become also an enthusiast. And this cultural barrier that their parents think they will not learn at all, and they don't agree. And that's our law, that the kids want to go in the direction of freedom, but parents say, no, you stay in that school where you are, because in that school, they will really reinforce discipline and they'll make sure that you're learning well.
Yeah, I see. I was a bit skeptical at first, but I agree. If you work from the bottom up, it can work.
And guys, one important thing I wanted to address here, I wanted to address to all of you, especially if we are in different countries, because we're quite a constellation. For each country, at very little cost, you can set up a social media platform stating similar goals, those which we can establish in the following week, like merged campaigns of clarify compulsory education and Lex Libertas from Poland. This as the unification of fantastic forces expressed as a single goal to end coercion and set up those social platforms in the individual countries. This is extremely important from the point of view of Poland because Kubis, I think, Kubis arranged something like that happening in Slovakia, if I'm not mistaken. And I recall vividly when there was one enthusiastic post on the Instagram, it went like wildfire in Poland because kids said, hey, they're doing that in Slovakia. So perhaps we have a chance in Poland too. So it was extremely important. And now if we demonstrate that there are many people of goodwill in many countries, our chances could increase dramatically. I think it has extremely important psychological effect.
May I share some thoughts?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So first on the last point that you were making, I think whatever is happening, the more countries it can happen in, the better it will be for the goal. So rather than feeling like, okay, it's only us in Poland who are doing this, or in Slovakia or us in Sri Lanka, that solidarity of doing something with people around the world, I think is very powerful. Um, there is also something I was reading today about the history of where children were born, because now I think it is very much the norm that mothers give birth in hospitals, but this was, some years ago, not really the norm. And I was reading of how um, before the 1940s in the UK, almost everybody gave birth at home. And then by 1970s, it was that almost everybody gave birth in a hospital. And then in 2010, this lady had brought a case to the European Court of Human Rights claiming that her home country, Hungary, was denying her legal rights to birth at home because at that time Hungary had banned it. And she won the case, and that meant that home birth became a legal right for all women and people across the European Union. So, just from a similar angle, I know that in some countries, I'm not, and I presume also in Poland, that homeschooling is considered illegal. So, if somebody can challenge that we have the right to have our education outside of school, because UDHR, when it said compulsory education, did not mean compulsory schooling, and that people who want to have their education in a way that is not in school should have the right to do so. And for the people who still want to continue doing that, they can still continue doing that, right? Because I think it would be sort of undemocratic to force them out of a system that they are, for whatever reason, content with. So maybe the approach would be, or the change in the law that we could target would be to ensure this right is available for everybody. Because this has more precedent that we can take on from the perspective of the rights of the child.
Yeah, we thought about this. I'm skeptical, but perhaps someone wants to provide feedback if he or she believes this is a good pathway. My skepticism comes from the fact that each time we leave decision in the hands of the adult population, however smart, we are on a losing position because of the power of mythology. And I'm basing that, I'm not sure you're aware, Sifan, we had such a case already in Europe. If you Google for Wunderlich family in Germany, that's one of the countries which have the ban on homeschooling. They already waged the battle, and in the end, they lost in the Supreme Court of the European Union. So the Human Rights Court. Somehow it stated that Germany has the right to to pursue the legal solutions that they have. In other words, once you pass this to the adult elites, including legal elites, which could actually be even at disadvantage, which I can explain on some other occasion, we are on the lost ground. That's why I believe in the power of the youth and power of single adult individuals. So that's why I was thinking about the school strike is a great idea, and the parliamentary bill where you need just 2-3 members of parliament to get convinced, and that's already likely, who need to move to extend to 15. That will be a fantastic foothold in this adult world. So in other words, the children translate their power through a couple of enlightened adults. Instead of relying on this whole system, we on the similar basis we rejected ideas like referenda, like citizens' bills, and a couple of other tools and pathways towards legal change, because all those tools are in the hands of adults. And I'm not sure you're aware of this Wunderlich case, but I will sure pass it to you because it's pretty depressing. If you look at the struggle of a fantastic family, that's lots of kids. I think the only disadvantage or weakness was that it was a Christian family in Germany. So I think yeah, our friends from Germany will be pretty aware of that case. So I'm afraid that could reduce your optimism.
Yeah, if I may add something, the problem with homeschooling, even in the countries that it is fairly legal and even I would say maybe not encouraged, but at least no big obstacles are made. So in all the Anglo-Saxon countries, the homeschooling involves a lot of parent attention, and it's not very popular. We are talking about 1, 2, maybe 10% of population that is actually going into the homeschooling, and that's not a solution. That's maybe a start, but it's not the solution for the whole problem. What we really need is actually to change the system of the school system in order to grant pupils the ability to actually shape their future and not allow the adults to intervene too much. It's only about making sure that we think about the pupil as the human being.
Guys, I apologize. I was a little bit distracted because I realized one of the most important guys here is missing, is Richard Frensham. Stefan, I think he has just asked a question at My Life, My Education. I think we should provide
Richard is here.
No,
Richard is here. He's on the chat.
Richard, yes.
I've managed to connect. Sorry for being late.
Fantastic. No, we realized very early in the morning. And funny thing, I told Tom Dury agreed to come. However, I didn't realize that it starts at 6 a.m. at his place because Vancouver is like 3 hours away from Ottawa.
Right. Yeah. It's not too late for me. I just I couldn't get the server working right.
Excellent, but you're here. Listen, so maybe I will recapitulate the most important things for you. Maybe you will have your own contribution. So I spoke about the optimism of a simple education law in Poland and perhaps a school strike and perhaps pushing the bill through parliament. Stefan spoke of a legal case in which we could combat the ban on homeschooling through the legal system. And I was skeptical because of the Wunderlich case. And Vito spoke about homeschooling. Vito, the actual number for Poland is only 1%. If you take this recent exposure, it's only 1% of kids in homeschooling. And I can add that in my environment, at least 60% of kids age, say, 10 to 16 would like to move to homeschooling. So it's the parents who stand in the way. Richard, what's your solution for the end of coercion?
Yes, of course, I have the solution that everybody else is looking for. That's our constant struggle, and I don't think the answer is the same in every part of the world and for everybody. But I agree with Vito Grab, if I'm referring to you properly, Vito, that we need to be looking at change from within the public system. This is where most of these students are. But it's not just for that reason. It's the idea of we've got to be looking beyond just the education of the child. We've got to be looking at what kind of society we want to create. And if we don't have a strong public institution promoting public education, offering the best education for each child right within their own communities as a launching pad, then we have the potential fragmentation of society where everybody starts looking for the school opportunity that's going to be best for them, or the homeschooling option with support in learning environments in some way. If we really want to create strong societies, we have to have a place that we come together. And right now, the pressure seems to be on people to find something other than public education, which has communities disbanding or fragmenting, kids living next door to each other, going to different schools so they don't get to know each other as much, all of that. So I'm just promoting the idea that we've got to look for a solution that does more than just gets the right education to each child, but rather that creates the society that we want. That's where I'm coming from. And I've been really encouraged by the Learning Planet Institute, the festival that it just ran, and with the evolution of thinking in UNESCO. I think that we're seeing that maybe the time has come that instead of fighting with them, that we actually start to work with them and become part of that fold. So that's my current thinking. I think it's great to see all these people here on this call. It's really encouraging for me. So thanks, Piotr.
Yes, Richard, I have a little bit of bad news and a little bit of good news. The bad news comes from the area of school strike in Poland. The good news comes from the brain, and the brain is my hobby, so I will leave the good news for the end. So we had a major, I would say, conflict within those kids who wanted to initiate the school strike. One of the young leaders, who is not here, one of the young leaders is absolutely convinced that private schooling is the solution. And before we joined forces, he already had an idea of freedom, but in his plan, and he was 16 when he formulated his plan, he said this education must be private. That was the idea. And after many, many discussions, we concluded that actually what we strive for primarily is the end of coercion. And in the plan, according to our idea how the education should look like, there is no preference to public schools as opposed to private schools. They only compete between each other on the basis of student satisfaction. And those, what we call today public schools, would be in the hands of local authority. And if local authority can satisfy local population and local students better than whatever private initiative shows up, then kids will go whatever they are, as free kids. They'll go whatever they feel better. So I insisted and that we never fight for a specific solution, public or private. Just let's look for the freedom and let the ecosystem um, ecosystem of the schools settle the account comes with children. Let the children choose where they feel better. And I believe that children are the smartest components of the entire equation, and they will make good choices, and the evolution will go in the right direction. The other part of this equation about public support, because your prime thing is that some kids may not be able to find themselves efficiently in the system in a society which is highly diversified, including the income level. So the second component of the reform would be school vouchers given to each individual child. In other words, a kid gets some money he can spend on his education, and that money can go either to the public or the local authority schools, or to private initiative, or to homeschooling, or to learning on the computer by yourself, what, whichever satisfies the kid most. In other words, the public component now moves from the ownership of school to the destiny of the money in the system. So kids will be supported by public effort, which is money from the taxpayer, through the school vouchers. And those vouchers have nothing to do with the capitalist thinking which permeates Western solutions. School vouchers are actually a form of money or a form of basic income, which is limited to a specific age range. And finally, the optimistic part about the societal fragmentation. I am convinced and sure the free kids, with a bit of support, will build the society of our dreams. Like we are here, full of love, nice discussions. I believe free brains gravitate towards intelligence, and we are most intelligent when we are in a collective. Richard, what do you think?
I think where we run into problems is people getting rid of their notions of what public school is all about. And if we think in terms of a public school, Peter Gray brings this up, the idea of the two learning institutions that we have, one being the library, one being public education. Public education being forced learning about things that you don't have necessarily an interest in. Libraries being self-directed learning, where you walk in and you get help to learn the things that you want to learn. So the vision of public school would be more like the library, where the student, the learner, walks in to the institution and says, this is what I want to learn. And then the librarian opens the world up to that student as to all the ways that they could explore that. So that library model, we might call it the ecosystem of learning in the neighborhood, becomes the launch pad for the student. It offers a meeting place for everybody. It offers to be a community builder, but it's the neighborhood launch pad for learning, and it incorporates the ideas that Yakovech has with learning cities. That was a notion. I forget the name of the book now. He referred to it, but it's some Vancouver author that came up with this idea of learning cities. So we have to get rid of a lot of these preconceptions of what public education, public schools are all about. Uh, if they are properly developed, they become this place where an excited learner goes and gets stimulated by others and has opportunities to take part in things outside their neighborhood. So they can be going off to learn in other places. but then they come back to their community and share what they've learned. So that's the sparking idea, that when you see somebody who's excited about something, you want to learn about it yourself. And so you create learning environments where there is this constant sparking going on, which brings the real world to the attention of the learner in the community. So education that is community building and offers students the non-coercive choices of whatever it is they want to pursue in a healthy environment. I don't know if that helps to clarify or not. I put in chat that Sifan and I are both speaking at the Liberation of Education conference coming up at the end of February. And I also put in chat what I think is, for me, the most clear thinking challenge to our views on the rights of young people and how we have to address it. And if we can get that conversation going within that Learning Planet Institute, the Learning Planet Alliance, and UNESCO, if we can raise our profile there, I think that that's where we can start to make a difference.
Richard, I think we are in total agreement because you're focusing on the environment for learning. And that's the right anchor for the entire discussion. Free children, which can enter this library, and that dream can happen. And the terminology public, private, is actually secondary because it's not essential for the child who owns the library. And if we have a public library and private library, and children probably don't see the difference and don't even know about this, they choose solely on the basis of their personal learning satisfaction. So we have the core agreement. The kids need to be free and they need to have rich environments. And I also noticed on the chat that Sifan does not support vouchers. I think it just comes from the fact that they have this negative association with Milton Friedman, the capitalist economy, and the use of the system, the use for making money. While in this library metaphor, vouchers are actually a pathway for the kid to enter the library. In other words, they have, if they're in the hands of a child and facilitate the child's decision, you can separate them from seeing it as the right, as the left, as conservative or liberal. The voucher is just a form of money which lubricates a child's entry into Richard's library. Sifan, what do you think?
What I would actually rather see is just that there are more and more public funded institutions available. So schools, libraries, community centers, education cities, whatever it is, and that you don't have to worry about the cost at the time of using it. So like for example, most roads are public roads, they're not toll roads. You can just use the road. And then in some countries, you have toll roads where if you want to use the road at the point of using it, you need to pay. Because if you have some kind of voucher system, then your ability to make use of the services will always be dependent on the value of the voucher. So from the theory that, well, instead of the state is spending this much for you on public schools, so instead of that, you can go and spend it at a private school instead, then really only looks at the formal school part of the education and not the other possibilities that arise. When education is currently seen as being so centered around schools, it's also very likely that the parent will influence the child to choose to spend that on the schooling and not on some other things that could be of benefit. So I am more inclined to just more public funding of services that people may make use of. I mean, also if you look at healthcare, so in Sri Lanka we have public funded healthcare, and if you need it, you go and you use it, and it's paid for. It's not like you have a allowance that you can choose to spend on your healthcare. You just use it as much as is necessary. But I think this is a maybe more minor detail and should not be maybe the focus of the conversation now.
I think it might be a minor detail, but we can easily resolve it because I think we can just change the terminology. You speak about publicly funded schools. Why don't we speak about publicly funded students? Public funds the students and they choose the school and they just want to find their own niche for development independent of how the school was built, who was contributing, what is the sort of building materials. In other words, all those factors are secondary. We want children to have support and have freedom of decision. So when Richard speaks of public schools and you speak of public funding for schools, if we just say we publicly fund children, that's a nice compromise in terminologically also. And this way we can just shed all this burden of vouchers being a capitalist invention or a conservative invention. This is actually a very socialist thing when we pass money to children and let them make the decision. And what you say about the culture that parents will force children, I agree that this will be a problem for perhaps a generation.
May I comment, Bjorta?
Yes.
I don't support vouchers. I put that in the chat too, and I don't fundamentally support the idea of fund the student, because that then leads to students going outside their neighborhood, doing whatever. My concept of it is publicly fund the community of learners adequately, and so you have these community ecosystems of learning. And we can call that public education or local libraries or whatever, but it's this community of learners. And so publicly fund the community for learning. And then how the funds are used would be, and we grow this idea, but basically it would be along the lines of how a democratic school works, that it's got money and students that have particular interests request access to money that they need in order to pursue that interest, and so they're learning to negotiate how to get funds, do fundraising. It might be that the community itself is not prepared to give a student as much money as they might want for some adventure that they want to go on. And so then fundraising, how can you get more money? And the whole thing becomes a learning environment then where students, it's real life and they're making decisions about where the money goes in community with others. And this is democratically working out how a community's resources are going to be used. If it's funding to the student, then it becomes very me first oriented. And our first thing that we have to accomplish with public education is the building of a good, strong society of people coming together.
Richard, I'm a little bit surprised when you speak about fundraising. In our concept, those school vouchers, even if they are funded for less what we presently spend for education, they will cover beautifully or well above the needs of an average democratic school. In other words, there is no question of fundraising. The kids enter the library and never have a worry. No one has a worry about fundraising unless they have some fancy projects on their mind. But I think
Yes, fancy projects.
Our main difference is, I think, neurobiological. And I hope I will convince you at some point that humans are far more naturally fantastic creatures than than your statement in the first implies. We naturally seek interaction with others. We seek intelligence, and that's part of the physical design of the human brain. So, funding individual kids for their own choices not only doesn't increase the risk of the decrease in the cohesion of the society, these will be the most fantastic, free and happy individuals which will actively seek building networks like we are building it right now. I'm sure you find enjoyment in the fact that there are so many of us here. I am like almost ecstatic. While most of my free life, you can say, I was pursuing individual goals. In other words, the evolution of the brain goes in the direction of intelligence and global intelligence. So we do network naturally. So if kids are not the development, if we don't interfere with their development, we do not need to worry that they will become egoist, uninterested in the community. So this is actually, I think, maybe I'll need to write a longer text about this because that's an interesting worry which you present here.
May I give one example?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you have a student, a young person in a community supported by an ecosystem of learners, and there's a certain amount of funding that place has. And you have a student that would like to go for a month-long adventure on a tall ship learning environment, that kind of situation. There's not enough money to fund all the children to go on such expensive adventures. And so how do you work that out? There are some families wealthy enough that they can pay for that kind of trip for their kids themselves. And in the kind of free, non-coercive learning environment that we're talking about, you don't have forced learning. So kids are free to choose to do that whenever it's suitable to them. But for the kids who are not as well off, for them to be able to present to their learning community that I too would really like to go on one of these tall ship adventures, but I don't have enough money. Can the school fund me to go on that? And so then you get into discussions. Well, the school doesn't have that kind of cash to give to individual students. What we can do is we can contribute to it, and then maybe help you fundraise. And so you're learning about other things there. The whole thing becomes a learning and a learning question. It's not just a case of handing money to people. Raise money for the things that are most important to you on an individual basis. Go to your neighbors, do whatever, solve the problem. Critical thinking, all of that stuff is practiced in the process. I'm going to be quiet now. I feel like I've really monopolized the time here more than my share.
Oh yeah, I think you present fantastic examples because this is a thing to think about. I think this is more of a complaint about the society because the root of the problem which you present here in the example comes from the fact that we are diverse and we are pretty stratified. In other words, we have Elon Musk's and we have children who don't have enough money for the meal for the next day. So it's a problem of society, which is perhaps percolating down to the issue of education. And I don't have the answer because I'm not sure how we should. Actually, I do have an answer how we should structure society to solve such problems. I just don't have the trajectory how to traverse there. For sure, the first step in that direction is freedom, so that all individuals can look for best ways to adapt to the surrounding world. But second important factor is that I do not believe that in free development, cases of this kind of discrepancy between the chances for development will be significant. In other words, if you take the unschooling community of 100, you might see 1, 2 cases of those adventures which are expensive, and they will not be to the detriment of community, and they'll be to the benefit of those 2, 3 individuals. And as a collective, they will all benefit because they will all adapt differently. So you may see it as a case of social injustice, but we should rather address the social injustice of the entire society. I don't have a trajectory, but for sure, the starting point is to let kids adapt optimally to the world. They will seek intelligence. They will seek intelligence for the collective. So we may not have ideal solution, but we may have optimum solution. In other words, each individual, like a plant in an ecosystem, working for his own goals and passions, will adapt to the environment and produce an ecosystem which is healthy and vibrant. Perhaps not to our dreams, but still optimum for the current status quo.
I have a question.
Mhm.
I would like to know, you guys spoke about library metaphor and public funding, and these two, Was and Richard. How does this differ from Finnish universities where I'm basically able to pick what I want to learn? I have a specific number of points I have to collect in my 3 years of bachelor degree, and I basically can freely choose the courses I want to attend. So how does this line of thinking differ from that system?
I think it's very similar. The society will impose its differences onto that process. But if you have a specific number of points and you have an equal starting point in your trajectory, then the analogy is very good. Except, obviously, for the many, many years before, you've been under a pressure of the school coercion. So, in other words, those entrants to this nice system are already somehow damaged by the prior process. So their decision making may be suboptimal. But if I understand you correctly, the metaphor is good.
Yeah,
The comparison is good.
yeah, I think that's spot on. But why talk about vouchers when it seems to me, a very good system already that you can lend ideas from?
Yeah, I think vouchers like a form of money for the kid. We want every kid to have a chance. So that's an expression of every kid gotta get the same chance apart from whatever his parents or his privileged environment can give him as an extra. But when we look at 4% of Polish GDP and the money it yields for education, it's a tremendous amount of money. I'm telling you, all kids will be in the seventh heaven if they could get their hands on that money and they could use it optimally. The education will like spring up manifold. So I'm sure with Stefan and Richard, we discussed it also with Gianna at some point, or Yana. The vouchers for all empathetic people, the first reaction is negative. But if you look at this as a form of money or form of basic income or a chance of support, that changes the perspective. So how many countries do we have here? We have Slovakia, I think. We have Finland. We have Canada, Spain. We have China. Now we have India. Yeah. So if everyone sets up a nice social site, whatever platform, whatever is your favorite platform, we could list it as The network is growing.
Yeah, but what I'm seeing is growing, but in a diverse way. So I see there's not much of agreement, for instance, with the vouchers or the entire vision of how this should be.
I see it differently. I think, look at the Richard's metaphor. We agree on that. So I think we differ more in terminology and interpretation than in fact. And we have a rich FAQ to answer all those questions. So, like socialists see school vouchers as a capitalist idea, but capitalists very often they see it as a socialist idea, and they are both right. It's just a matter of interpretation. We should see it as help for children. So, guys,
Because what
my main idea is my main request is this: everybody. It takes minutes, literally, to set up a new platform under the end school slavery or clarified compulsory schooling or my life, my education. One of those, we could have a social platform, integrate them, and show that there is support in many countries. If it is even the seed of the first person in a given country, that is already of psychological benefit. So, that doesn't mean, Palace, you want to conclude the meeting?
Yeah, we can wrap up here if you want.
Okay.
Can I just say something before that?
Oh yeah, Stefan, could you put yourself on video, because there is a little bit problem with sound quality, but once I have you on video, I understand every single syllable.
Right. So on the basis for this strike, my sort of suggested approach would be to use the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, not on the right to privacy like the German family had used. Richard has shared a recording of a session where we talked about some of the aspects of that, of sort of the broader evolution of the human rights discourse and how the UN agencies only now really coming into tune with some of the things that democratic education has been saying and doing for like more than 100 years. But so there are specific rights to children guaranteed in the Convention of the Rights of the Child. And it's, I think, especially powerful that the convention came about as a result of the Polish delegation and was strongly influenced by Janusz Korczak's work as well. So if children are to say that my right to freedom of expression is being violated, my right to freedom of assembly is being violated, my right to herd is being violated, then it is very powerful, because when the country ratified the convention, then they have an obligation to respect, protect, and uphold those rights. So if the children are saying that when you do this in schools, it is violating my rights, it is much harder to ignore. And I don't often remember if Poland has ratified the third optional protocol, but for countries that have ratified it, children can directly write to the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child and say, our rights are being violated in X, Y, Z ways. And then the committee is obliged to look into that. So by engaging with the mechanisms of the UN on the rights, I think we have a lot more credibility for what we do.
Stefan, if this reminds me that we have a family in Warsaw who, as we speak, I know, or perhaps it will happen tomorrow, they will go to the monument of Korchak and they will record something which you asked for. So look how fast it happens when when people network into bigger intelligence. But I think you could record for us a short message, as say a minute TikTok message on this child rights convention, because I think your idea is very unique. I'm not sure Vito will disagree with me, but in Poland, I don't think anybody spoke in those terms thus far. Nobody spoke about clarifying compulsory education. That's also your unique idea. So I think your input could be fantastic, because it totally shakes up the groundwork of human rights, where even very smart lawyers stood against us, saying, "Look at the Polish constitution, which was, as I once mentioned to you, written on the basis of the Human Rights Convention. So it's just like copy paste individual phrases. But you have this fantastic new insight, and by speaking about Korchak and coming from Sri Lanka, I think it's a powerful message. People will realize that someone far away knows children's rights better than we do, and yeah, that'll be fantastic. By the way, I think Palace is recording, so perhaps we can even extract, although it will be probably low quality because of actually I'm not sure how it works technically. Anyway, I think it's a fantastic idea if you record for us a minute video to Polish children or to Polish parliamentarians. That will be priceless. Richard?
Yeah, I will see what I can do, although I'm not too sure what I can fit for 1 minute, but I'll share something I recently did for a minute in the chat as well.
I think you did it in 1 minute. You did it in 1 minute.
Maybe take something from that, the biggest barrier to rights affirming education talk you did, Safan, a little clip from there. There was so much that you said there that's good. And then that could just be the teaser to get people to go and watch the whole talk that you gave.
I will try to think of a very Poland specific message.
George, I really appreciate you pulling this group together and encouraging high level of thinking around this. Thank you very much.
I wanted to say that indeed, Sifan, if he addressed Poland specifically, or perhaps even school strike children, tell them what he thinks about their right to be heard. Because right to be heard, that's the key word. They have no vote, they have no rights, they cannot leave the classroom, they cannot be absent. There are so many limitations on their ability to express themselves. So if wisdom based on human rights, based on the tradition of Korczak, which is pretty well known in Poland, expressed from far away in Sri Lanka, that could be extremely powerful. Awakening. Richard? Richard, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I think we should try to frame something very similar with you. Because you represent the wisdom of the ages.
I
think
I put in chat a link to this conference coming up the end of February. The timing is bad for people in Europe. I think it would end up late in the night for you to attend, but that's where things are continuing. I've decided to concentrate my effort around creating visions of how change can be created from within the public education systems, with small pilot programs, with people willing to undertake them. we can create a non-disruptive, risk-free way of introducing non-coercive learning into public education so that people start to get some experience with it. And it wouldn't be a case of going full tilt with it, that you go from teacher directed to child directed all of a sudden, and your curriculum is your own choice and all of that. It can be just a taste. And so a pilot program that gives students a taste of what it is to be more control, having more control over their learning, get the ball rolling that way is what I'm going to be presenting. And so I'm not going to be really putting myself on stage as somebody has the bigger picture answer. I think Stefan and Yana are doing a great job of that. And then I'll just promote this one little pilot program idea that willing people could undertake in order to create a vision of how we can bring about the transformation of education in a way that doesn't create a lot of disruption and confrontation. How does that sound?
I have one reservation because Poland is actually now pretty rich in experimentation and lots of initiative. People trying different kinds of democratic schools and different ways of approaching education. However, the culture and the law and the system are all staked against those initiatives. Even if there is some innovation, which is very popular, the system still works against it. In other words, when kids choose, yes?
So the pilot program that I'm suggesting is not an answer as such. It's what it does is it creates the conditions for change, invites change, and so there's a difference there, that we're not trying to prescribe something. We're trying to create the opportunities for people to pursue what it really means to be a non-coerced learner.
Yeah, the thing is that those initiatives and those propositions for testing how it feels to be free in Poland are systematically strangled by the system, by the law. That's why we're going in the direction of freedom from the limits of the law.
And so that's what I try to address with the example that I give. How to not be stifled by the people who can't get their minds out of the old way of doing things. They can coexist, but they mustn't stifle others who want to expand into the non-coercive realm.
Yeah, I would need to get.
And so how to do that? Two philosophies competing under the same roof. How do you manage that? And how do you allow for the scalability and the experimentation required to pursue the idea that you can have public schools that are non-coercive? Allow the pioneers a possibility to do their pioneering work.
So when you say two solutions under one roof, that sounds like
two philosophies, yeah, or two philosophies.
Two philosophies under one roof. That's perfect, because that allows the good win over the bad. So let people choose what works best for them. However, we have a tilted system in Poland in which those who try to put two philosophies under one room, under one roof, they immediately stifle one through the legal regulation. So that's how the whole evolution of the system proceeds in steps and bounce and comes back in oscillations. In other words, we gain some freedoms, we have some new initiatives, they grow, and then the system strikes back, and those initiatives get stifled by one regulation or another. So there is
I've experienced what you've said.
You have experience.
I have experienced that fight back by the dominant paradigm. So the whole idea that we're in a paradigm shift right now, with the dominant paradigm still stifling the contender. And so, given, if we learn our lesson from history, Thomas Kuhn, that paradigms compete, and that even when a dominant paradigm has outlived its usefulness, it's going to do what it can to stifle the contender because it wants to maintain the power. And so, if we're to learn from history, how do we, in the situation that we're in, where public education is proving to be so inadequate for our needs at this time, how do we put the two paradigms on an equal footing? And that's what I address. And then the as much as possible, the non-threatening way to grow that within a public school system. And you have them distinct. You allow for people who have an inkling that, well, maybe this would work, but there's no way I'm going to draw my kid out of public education, send them to private school or do homeschooling. How do you give them a taste of what it is right within their community school? And if they like it, they can stay with it. If they don't, they can go back to the old way. But the choice is with the learner. And so that's the concept that I'm trying to get under discussion at this point.
I think each time you speak, I see that apart from the terminology, what we propose in Poland is exactly what would meet your requirements and dreams. So we still have chance to talk about this, especially that I think I will need to put on my list a better description of the process in which individuals, totally free from any bounds of society, will still tend to enter that cohesion with the network for the mere sake of global intelligence. Guys, have you noticed that Tom Dury didn't manage to join? I think at this moment it is 7 a.m. And he said,
Yeah.
and early morning, no, and getting up early morning slavery. That was his statement. So I apologize because in the invitation I wrote that we expect Tom Dury. I didn't compute correctly that it's very early in the morning for him.
No worries. We'll be in more events in the future, anyways.
Hey guys, so my last appeal: if you're in any exotic country, create your own social platform under one of the main banners against coercion, and please let me know, or any one of us know. We'll put it under one roof to make sure that all those initiatives work together to send a message to individual societies that something is happening. Smart people are working.
Piotr,
Yeah.
two things. Are you doing the strike in March?
Yes, that's the plan. I'll tell you that this year we don't have a strike leader. Someone proposed, we don't have a leader. We just try to use this social concept network to make it work. So I'm not sure how it's going to work, but for sure we're in touch with parliamentarians, select parliamentarians. So there are parallel pathways which might enter some kind of synergy, because when kids, I mean, those who lead the effort, they hear the parliamentarians are interested and have a chance to talk to parliamentarians, the energy increases. So I'm not sure how it's going to work, but anyway, yes, we do it.
Absolutely. And the other thing that when you talk about all the initiatives, what I have noticed on Instagram, for example, when I follow urbanist channels, they all retweet each other and they promote each other's content. So even if they have differing opinions, perhaps that's what we should be doing a lot about this.
Yes, absolutely. Especially
As the
this is exactly the same phenomenon where me, Richard, or Stefan, we made different details, but about human rights we all agree, and there is a powerful synergy between all those forces, and that's what those forces, Richard, those forces put us together because we feel like in a group we are much bigger, bigger strength.
Yes, absolutely, and uh, we're still trying to clarify this new way of doing things, and what can happen is we end up fighting each other on just aspects of it, like vouchers or no vouchers under the same roof, separate schools. Uh, we have to realize that the the goal here is non-coercive learning, and we never let the details detract our collective effort to
Mhm.
get. And this is where I bring the focus to what Stefan and Diana have so nicely laid out for us. If we can keep our eye on that ball and do all of the exploration, appreciating the different things that people are pursuing. So your ideas about voucher versus the point system that was mentioned, this all helps in the clarification if we don't dig in too much in our own ideas of the details. Let people be free to explore the the new opportunities as much as possible, and we'll gradually arrive at that place where we all agree that we have finally turned learning over to the learner again, and
Mhm.
life is good.
Guys, because if, for the sake of unification between end school slavery and my life, my education, I created a little wiki which we can all use. Just Sifan and Gianna and Palace and me will be creating editors who would like to contribute. So maybe as the last act, I will quickly find the link to that wiki and put it on the chat. Palace's chat is the best place. I'll quickly search for it.
If I could just add here to a thought that has come up that I think is important, language, very important. And I've had pushback on the term end school slavery,
Mhm.
as if the issue here is that Black people say you're comparing what kids are going through in school with what slavery was actually like for us, and they're offended that we should take that word to explain what kids are going through in school, and so we create that dichotomy. It's harder to invite people into the discussion, people of color into the discussion if we're using that kind of language. So
Mm.
just a thought there that end school slavery, just that bit of language is a little problematic itself.
I think I recall exactly the beginning of the term. So when we had the Declaration of Educational Emancipation, at the end of it is reference to slavery as well, and we just made a little vote, internal vote about should it should it be used or not. And I remember distinctly Tom Dury was say that's exactly what you say, not for the sake of. Mm, I understand your argument. However, it's the purpose is the pushing the overtone window. There's a term from social change which says that you need to be a little bit more extreme than whatever you want to achieve. So that's when this term will enter this declaration, and it is controversial. Actually, maybe Sifan, what do you think?
About the slavery term.
No. If the use of end school slavery at the end of the Declaration of Educational Emancipation is a good idea or could be aggravating for different ethnicities.
Um, so when Richard was saying this, I was also sort of affirming that sometimes uh, the terms that can appear powerful for some of us can be upsetting for other people. So, for example, for something um, for something that I was doing, I was thinking of using a picture of the gates of Auschwitz, where it has this German sentence that work makes us free. But I felt that that could be um, seen as insensitive by some people, and then especially with all the things going on in Israel and Palestine these days, that would be like that picture could be taken to mean something very different, and it could go somewhere else altogether. So I decided that even though it was a powerful device, it wasn't a good idea to use this. So for the term slavery is a powerful device, but again, it's could be alienating for some people, and if we want this to be a um, global action, then I think we need to use words that are inclusive. And if some people are saying that this name is upsetting for us, then I think we should listen to them.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that's a great metaphor, because that's actually, I noticed that in Poland, referring to Auschwitz is very sensitive. And I can now imagine that could be also sensitive, say, to Black Americans in America. I just remember Tom Dury was definitely for, because he said the radical, once you get radical, then you really wake people up. So anyway, there is no debate about this at the point. We already agreed that about those Discord servers, will separate the rebels from the educators. The educators will try to stay high and fly high, while the rebels can get still excited about freeing themselves from the bondage. And in the end, if we unite all those social media platforms, we can very easily come to a compromise. And for sure, the kids need to have a voice in that. So, I think we find a solution. At this moment, it's all rudimentary in the early stages. So, I'm not saying one way or the other.
One thing, one thing to note when you have movements like this, you really have to show different things to different audiences. Like the core idea needs to remain the same, but like the language and everything, when you cross borders, metaphorically, you have to change what you're saying while still meaning the same thing. So you tailor it to different audiences if you want to have a large movement.
Oh yeah, that's very important actually about school strike. It's exactly the same thing which we came up this year. So the strike is just named as against school coercion. It's not even fighting for this law. There is no issue of vouchers or privatization or this public funding. All those issues are under the umbrella of school coercion. So this way, we can have more student organizations, even those who come from the skeptical point of view, as long as they agree with the main point. We have a force. So that thinking is extremely important. That yes, we need to frame the language for all the individual subpopulations, and it's okay to have streams of force under the common umbrella. So that's nice. We have My Life, My Education, which is so beautiful. I associate with bananas and beautiful islands. And it's good also we have this school slavery for a subset of kids who really feel like that. They feel like they have so little voice, like they are in bondage. Anyway, we make decisions in the future. We make, for sure. As long as I'm alive, we're working that direction.